Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got author, I've got speaker, I've got a CEO of a business, professor at University of Colorado in Boulder, Dan Bruder. Dan, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Brett. How are you?
I am good. It's good to be with you today. And you're out in beautiful Colorado. I'm here in O'Fallon, Illinois, and we're just talking some weather. We're finally getting this nice weather dialed in, aren't we?
Yeah, it is. We're getting a lot of rain now, which we needed. We were hit by some pretty severe fires earlier this year, and it disrupted our community. So anytime it rains here in Colorado, we're happy as anybody can be.
I bet, man. Get that stuff nice and wet so those fires don't take over.
Yeah, that's
true. It was tough year for you guys for sure. So if you can, Dan, why don't you just kind of give us the lay of the land on what's made Dan Bruder the man you are today? Beforehand we talked about, from banking to, in the hotel business to all the stuff you're doing now. So you've had quite a career, and excited to talk to you about it. But what's really made you the man you are today?
Well, I guess I'd have to say my wife, but my wife and my mom, right? But going outside of that into career stuff, career-wise, when I grew up in Florida and played sports, and I didn't grow up in the best town, you could say. So it was like sports or some other things that weren't really good. School was secondary where I grew up, so I chose the path of going and playing sports, which I did until I realized I wasn't good enough to make it a career. So I stopped playing sports, but fortunately I was able to go to college and get a degree. And once I got out of school, I was even more fortunate to work with companies, particularly like you mentioned in the banking business, where, I worked for a bank that their motto was build your community, you build your bank. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And they started investing in me and teaching me how to do various different things like serve customers, really basic stuff. And they taught me about how to listen, be patient. They taught me how to lead others. And then after several years in banking, I left that and went into the resort business with Marriott. And Marriott kind of kept with that tradition and trained me how to manage through change, emotional intelligence, all these things. And then somewhere in the 90s, I was like, man, I feel really lucky because a lot of my friends that I grew up with didn't have that opportunity to work with really good companies that invested in their people. And what they were investing in was they wanted somebody that was going to help them succeed in these businesses. But the truth is everything they taught me helped me at home. It helped me in my community. It helped me with my relationship with my spouse. It helped me become a better father. It helped me become a better community member. And I was like, I couldn't imagine without being influenced by my organizations, these businesses that most people would say they're only there to make a profit. But man, I don't know where my life would be, not just financially, but interpersonally, intellectually, everything. I really I learned so much from business. So that I took forward. When I started consulting, I was like, man, we got to do something where businesses take a greater responsibility in developing the human side of the people that work for them. And that's not just, this, we want to invest in charities type thing. It's about really investing in the growth and development of their people. So that's really was my cause several years ago. And it's really evolved into this concept of blendification, blending work and life. And there's other aspects of blendification as well. But to me, I feel like, when you want to succeed in life, you really need to look at life as being blended as opposed to separate. And that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am now. And there's a lot of other facets in there, but it's really about looking at, what we do at work and making sure that that's impacting positively the people around us and our lives.
Yeah, and I love how you call it blendification. We talk a lot about it here at our firm, Visionary Wealth Advisors. We talk about that work-life balance people try to talk about, and there is no such thing, right? And I think in my research you call it a myth, which I love because I actually absolutely agree. We talk about work-life integration. I learned that from a guy years ago in this podcast. And I like the word integration. I like blendification because no matter what's going on at home or at work, one's going to affect the other, right? Good or bad. And I think that's, to your point, what you're really diving in with people is blending those two things together and eliminating the myth of work-life balance. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a TED talk several years ago, and this concept of work-life balance. And I was exposed to this, back in the 90s. And work-life balance to me was somebody making an excuse for working too much. It's like, oh, I need more balance in my life. I need more balance. Basically demonizing work, right? I mean, that's
Yep.
essentially what work-life balance means. It's an excuse to demonize what we do with most of our life, which is our work. We spend nearly 40% of our waking time in work or work-related activities, and this concept of work-life balance basically demonizes a good portion of what we do. And I'm like, throw that away. Let's just start over and say, let's look at our work as an opportunity to really enhance our life, as opposed to this thing we dread. And if we look at it differently, a different lens, we might actually succeed more at work and in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So what made you go on that path? I mean, you could have stayed in the corporate America probably and continued to build a great career and have a nice life. But you decided to take, in my opinion, a lot of people don't take the risk and bet on themselves. You did do that. And I'm going to start this consulting gig. So talk to me more about that.
Yeah, there's been times where I thought a bet on myself wasn't really good. I wanted to jump back into the corporate life, right? It has its ups and downs when we go out on our own. But to me, it was really about trying to do something that could make a difference. And I remember several years ago when I was still trying to figure out whether or not I was going to stay in this consulting thing or jump back into the corporate world. I said, we only got one shot at this life, and I'm pretty committed to what I'm doing. And I made the conscious decision to throw any other pursuits or offers from anyone else away and just say, hey, if this takes me 10 years, 15 years, I'm going to go after it, because, in entrepreneurship, you only need to be right once.
That's right.
So I stuck my head down, and I really felt like I was being called to do this. And, with all the different things that were happening, I just stepped back and said, I'm just going to go for it. And when I committed, it really, the information, the research, everything started coming together, and it just seemed almost not easy, because there was a lot of work, but it wasn't hard to find enough information, and enough, really a platform to build this on. So believe me, entrepreneurship's not for everyone. I teach entrepreneurship up at CU Boulder, and my students sometimes ask me. In fact, this last semester they asked me about halfway through, why are we spending so much time on the psychology of business? And I said, because entrepreneurs typically don't fail because they have a bad product, or they have a bad market. It's usually because they run out of staying power, either from a
That's
financial
right.
perspective or motivation. And I think it's mostly motivation. They just
Yep.
lose it, and they just stop. And, they started seeing the need for greater emphasis and learning on the psychology of business, which I think we all need that, not just entrepreneurs, right?
Well, absolutely. That's what this whole podcast is about, is the psychology behind, the mindset, if you will, behind your attitude, your belief system, the actions that ultimately get your results in life. That's what the circuits of success are. Because, man, no matter if you're selling widgets or you're selling financial planning or whatever it is you're doing, man, it is a grind, right? And I think when I look back, you used the word committed. You said, when I committed. I'm assuming I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to. You probably didn't have like a plan B written out and ready, right? Plan A was the plan. Is that fair?
Yeah, initially I had a plan B because it was to go back into the corporate world. And as long as I had
Yeah.
that plan B, I wasn't fully committed to plan A. It's funny you say that. I was in a meeting one time with a group, and we're sitting around, and we said, what's plan A? And we said, this is plan A. And we went over that. And then somebody said, well, what's plan B? And they said, make plan A work. So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
and I always think about that. But the truth is that when I had a plan B or a fallback plan, I wasn't fully committed. And it wasn't to the point where I said, let's just take the time parameters away from this and let's just go after it. And that's when plan A and plan B became the same.
Yeah, and they have to become the same. I mean, I look back a little over 8 years ago when we started Visionary. It was this thing, right? It was the industry I was in, but you don't realize the risk that you're taking when you start a company from scratch. And I look back, and I'm in, not in an arrogant way, but I'm just like, man, the things I didn't know then that I know now, that maybe if I did know them, I wouldn't have done it. And I think until you get in, so many people want to, what is analysis by, or paralysis by analysis, right? And
Sure.
so many things that you want to do, if you actually knew them all, you wouldn't do it, right? We'd all talk ourselves out of it. We all have that little voice, I think, telling us no. So when you hear me talk like that, what comes to mind for you?
Well, you say some really good things there because, a lot of people ask, would you do things differently? And I'm like, oh, yes.
Right.
I would do a lot of things differently if I knew then what I know now. In fact, I probably wouldn't do what I have done if I would have known what I was going to have to do. And
Exactly right.
when I look back over time, I would do so many things differently. And the neat thing about all this is that I even look where we are now and the opportunity in front of us, and I go, I feel like we're just constantly starting, because as soon as we think we have it figured out, the world shifts, markets shift. We shift, we change, our interests, what motivates us change. So there's this constant evolutionary process to fit product to market, to fit personalities with products. And I think, I don't think we, or at least I'll speak for me, I've never really gotten to the point where I think I've got this one figured out. And I know that the next few years are going to be pretty crazy too. And it's just there's so much excitement and potential out there. It just blows my mind. And there's a lot we can do if we just keep an open mind to
Yeah.
change and adaptation.
But don't you think that's what makes the great great, right? I mean, if you sat there and thought, okay, I've got it all figured out, man. I know A through Z, it's perfect. I've got it all figured out. I'm not trying to learn anymore or be a student of the game, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But don't you think that's kind of the hubris there that it allows you to stay successful by not thinking you got it figured out?
Yeah, I think there was a point in my career that I was in a really good place. I was working for a good company. Things were good. I felt like, man, I've reached the point where I wanted to get. I was making good money. I wasn't traveling all over the place. I was close with my family. And then the world fell apart, right? Around
Right.
2008. And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, man, that feeling of comfort didn't really last that long. I later learned that one of the great false pursuits in life is this pursuit of comfort. And we seek comfort by trying to have more money. And most people have more money, live a very complicated life. And so I don't know. In fact, my business partner and I talk about this quite a bit. Is like, once you reach a certain amount, we think that money is going to cure all these ills, but it really creates more complexity in our life.
Right. Yeah.
And this whole idea around looking at money as our sheer outcome or singular outcome really puts us down a path of disappointment later on when we find out it wasn't what we really wanted.
Yeah, and I don't think you're ever going to find the number, right? Like, what's the number? What's enough? No matter. I mean, being in the wealth management business since for 20 plus years now, all I do is talk about money every day with people, right? And I know people that have this much money that are extremely happy, or extremely not happy. I know people with this much money, right, that are extremely happy or not happy, and it's amazing to me. And you must be reading my notes here because I said, how do we get comfortable being uncomfortable? Because for me, I am very comfortable being uncomfortable. And if there's not enough going on in my life, that's when I kind of get stressed out.
Yeah, that's a really big issue, Brett, because we look at what's going on in society and how, and I'll be the first to admit, the one who raised their kid by making sure things were a little easy. And now I have older kids, 25 and 21. Fortunately, they've turned out fine, but I look back at the way I raised my kids and said, did I make it easy? Did I try to make it too comfortable for them? And but how do we get comfortable with the uncomfortable? I think there's a lot to do with experience. Several years ago, 2017, my daughter went to the Air Force Academy, and she went through basic training for 6 weeks when she
Oh,
went there. And at the end of that, there was this thing called Acceptance Day, or A Day, and that's where they're accepted into the cadet wing. But there was a speaker called Colonel Gary Payton spoke. And of course, my daughter doesn't remember any of this when I tell it to her, but he stood up and he talked to all the cadets and he said, "You've accomplished something that very few people will ever do." and you didn't accomplish this on your own. You needed somebody to do this. And he dropped the phrase that I've really attached to this thing called earned success. So when we talk about comfort and being comfortable with the uncomfortable, it's about earning our success as opposed to having our success granted to us or given to us or inherited or so
That's
something like
strong.
that. So if we look at earned success, it's really about earning something, doing something we didn't think we could do, relying on others to get there. And then when we do it, we actually say, that's what it's all about. I was uncomfortable, but I really feel good about that. And this idea of happiness too, happiness, something needs to happen to be happy. But are we really pursuing happiness, or are we pursuing something that is fulfilling, joy in our lives? And that only comes through this thing called earned success, hard work that pays off in the long run. And along with this comes a lot of failures too, by the way. And
Yeah.
that's how we get comfortable, I think, by failing a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, but I love this concept. It's about earning our own success. I mean, when you really truly think about it, I look back, and my mind's going a thousand different directions right now because of this thought just of my career. And I look at the times I've done well, or the times even I've seen people that I work with do well or not do well. It's, you can physically get sick by not performing at your best abilities throughout the week, right? You see people that have the colds, they get colds all the time. They're always sick. And I'm no doctor, I'm no psychologist, I'm none of that stuff, but I've studied people enough to know that I know the people that live up to their abilities day in and day out get sick less often, because I truly believe that the body shuts down when it knows it's not doing what it's capable of doing, and then that's when the virus comes and attacks, right? So I think this earned success, man, is a great concept to talk more about. That more and more people, I think, got to focus on that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's and from a leadership perspective and inside an organization, it's really about creating opportunities that are challenging for people to succeed. So a lot of times I come in and I talk to organizations, and I talk about this idea of blendification, where work and life are connected, and people misinterpret that I'm saying that work needs to be a catalyst to make it easy for everybody at home, and I'm actually saying the opposite. Because if we as leaders of an organization make it easy for our people, the good people will go find somewhere where it's hard, and the people who want it easy will stay. So this is really turning it all upside down. If we have to live with this idea around blendification, but then we have to put in there this concept of earned success that makes things challenging. And as leaders, we should actually be forcing our employees to work hard towards something meaningful. Now, if we don't have anything meaningful, they're working hard towards nothing, and they're going to go find meaning somewhere else.
Yep.
So we'd have to have meaning in order for that. The success needs to have meaning to them, and it has to be hard. And I think that's where a lot of people miss it, is they think that, this is about just being nice all the time. And actually it's not. It's about really challenging people, but letting them know we're going to challenge you because you will grow more when you're challenged. You're going to look back on life in this segment of time that we spend together with greater trust and greater fulfillment based on how you perform in hard areas, not easy areas.
So how are you doing that for your own companies? Can you give us an example of what you're doing to challenge your employees, that not only is about work, but also the life side of it, right? The personal side of it. What are you doing personally?
Well, what we do at the top of this is we have created what I call the strategy whiteboard, and that's really how businesses navigates their path to the future. And that's kind of a structured process where I use strategy whiteboard, but contained within the strategy is identifying what the culture of the organization is, the organization's cause, its intentions, its behaviors and habits. And we put that out there as really what we define as culture. And that becomes what we're shooting for as an organization. And then from that, we go through and we develop a unifying objective, and then a series of strategic focus statements and strategic outcomes around various different areas within the organization. So that what we do with that is that really encapsulates what's going on in a business, where it's going, and what really creates meaning within the business. Now the employees have to attach to that. So we've actually developed software around this strategy whiteboard app. But the thing is we wanted to also incorporate the people's personal lives. So that's a business navigation platform. So what we also created alongside that or adjacent to that is what we call a personal whiteboard. So now each employee in an organization can plan and build their life and identify their pursuits in this using the same framework that the business does. So we have a strategy whiteboard for the business and a personal whiteboard, and they look the same. So what we do in that, when we do that, what we start seeing is that the employees start stretching their own personal goals through the personal whiteboard. Since they're developed the same, they start looking at the strategy whiteboard and saying, what's the business doing here? What's the business's cause? Where's the business going? What outcomes is the business pursuing? And we see this natural coming together of employees and the business, which is really, really cool. And I don't think we've really looked at, this idea of blendification. I mean, a lot of people say, yeah, work impacts life and so forth. But what are we doing about it? Like, how are we going and giving the employees the opportunity to use the same strategic management tools we use in the business, but for their personal lives? Yeah. And then they start growing together. It's a really cool thing when you start seeing employees stretching themselves and then checking back with the business and say, how do I contribute to the business if the business has meaning and purpose?
That's right. Well, you look at like a tree, right? The culture could be the tree, but each branch is a different part of that organization, right? That we all as employees of a company bring to the table. And I think that's where we've got to get better. So how important would you say a clear vision is that's articulated from the top? So you as a CEO of a company, whether you have 5 employees or 500 employees, how important is that clear vision articulated from you to everybody else in the company?
Well, gosh, if we were to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, I think we would all say it's got to be a 10. Now, some people call it vision, some people call it mission, purpose. We call it cause and intention. But without that, you've got a rudderless boat, basically. So that really becomes our first focus anchor, because as leaders, what our job is we need to anchor focus for the employees. And the vision, mission, cause, intention really becomes that first focus anchor, so that we can anchor the organization's focus down and say, this is where we're going. So I completely agree that, man, without that. But with that doesn't mean we're going to be successful. There's plenty of mission statements out there that really don't replicate or represent what the organization is really all about. And to me, that's not a blended company. So we talk about blending work and life. There's another level of blending, and that is, this is who we are. This is who we say we want to be as an organization, or this is who we aspire to be, but then we act differently. And that we really need to blend that vision, as you say, throughout everything we're doing inside the organization, strategically, operationally, culturally. And that's a process, by the way. So that's another level of blendification.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. You said on a scale 1 to 10, it's a 10. I agree. I think on the tough side of that, though, is constantly working and building. So like if we put together a 1 year, a 3 year, a 10 year, whatever the number is, right? It's like, okay, we focus on that, but how do you stay committed day in and day out to something that's 10 years away?
Well, it's funny. You mentioned the tree analogy. Man, we've done this a lot. And the below the strategy, we have culture, then we have our strategy, and then we have this execution, how we execute strategy. What we've created is, you mentioned the tree, the trunk, and the branches. I'll even go down into the roots. So we've created roots groups within organizations and through our software, that the roots groups are responsible for executing on the strategic platform that enables the organization to reach its desired goals and vision and mission. So there's got to be a whole process under this, because you've heard the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
Yep.
And I say, gosh, why do we have to choose? Why do we have to live in this world of absolutes? I think, culture, strategy, but then I'll even throw in operations and execution. All of that together makes a pretty darn good meal. So why don't we look at it that way? Why don't we look at, all these things together, rather than saying, well, if I got to choose one, I'm going to choose culture. But we don't have to choose one. We can choose all of them. And in order to maximize our success, we have to integrate an operating model that allows us to achieve our vision and our mission. And without that, the vision and mission is nothing more than just a platitude written on some wall somewhere in an office.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me, one of my favorite quotes is it's the abundance of the and versus the tyranny of the or. right? And it's such a strong statement when you're like, so the abundance of the and versus the tyranny of the or. It's not strategy or vision, to your point, right? It's strategy and vision and operations and culture and compliance and finance, right? And all those things, right, that we have to worry about. And I think so many of us, we get caught up in this world of the or world, whereas I try to tell people we want to live in the and world. Let's focus on that strategy, but let's also go out there and get our next thing done that we need to get done as well. So, so let's keep talking on this thing. So when you think about the being a student of the game, like what do you do? I love you used the word habits earlier. Like what are your habits right now that you do not miss? I follow you around every day with a camera. What am I going to see day in, day out from Dan Bruder?
Well, I actually track my habits. So foundationally, I believe that habits really represent who we are and who we are becoming. So we've created a tool for basically a habit chain or a habit tracker, and within an organization and personally, if we want to become something, the first place we need to start is looking at our habits. And Charles Duhigg said in his book, The Power of Habits, that habits represent something like 40% of our day. Like we don't even think about it. It's just autopilot. So if that's true, then our habits are going to either lead to success or failure. And so if we're going to change,